Hello, welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we get into self-care that is very holistic. So it's not just dabbling in self-care. It's not a little bubble bath here, a little pedicure there, some healthy eating and kale salads over here. It is the whole shebang. And I feel like the way that self-care is often presented through the media and through magazines and shows and that kind of thing it's incomplete. And yes, of course, it is important to focus on the body, but if that's all we focus on, we're missing all the juicy stuff on the inside. And especially if you're trying to change habits, if you're trying to eat more nutritiously, if you're trying to exercise more, if you just try to do it through willpower alone, it's very hard, close to impossible, in fact. But if you get inside and you go into that uncharted territory and you figure out what's really holding you back, and you shift your mindset and your beliefs, and you bring gratitude into your life, and you start to shift your relationship with time, these are all elements of courageous self-care, and then it makes the outer transformation so much smoother and more graceful. So that gets me really excited. I love sharing this kind of information with you, hence the podcast, because we just don't know what we don't know. And so it's helpful to have someone who's been through it, who can be a few steps ahead and offer some guidance. That's what I'm here for. And I also love to extend that guidance and opportunity to guests on the show who align with self-care. So today I have with me Pat Bettencourt. Pat, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Christina. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Speaking of gratitude, yes, me too. So Pat, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you love to spend your time these days.
Well, I am a 24/7 caregiver to my husband since 2014. And along the journey, a year and a half ago, I decided to become a holistic health coach to help others.
Beautiful. And how did you make that decision? Or is that part of your story of courage?
And that's part of my story of courage. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, we'll get there later. But I do want to know a little bit about the caregiving with your husband.
Well, it is 24/7. And I have to share that there have been times that I have not left my home for 6 months at a time.
Wow.
The challenges have been many, and again, that will lead me to sharing about my self-care to
Excellent.
Withstand that.
Yeah, okay, well, let's jump right into it. So I love to get guests to share something that you love to do as a current self-care practice, and I like to explain why that's important. I feel like the reason today that I want to share about these self-care practices is that sometimes we're doing things, or we're on the cusp of making a decision to do something, and we don't actually know that it's self-care. But when we can look through a different lens and see, oh, if I do that, if I make the leap and start making that a habit, or, oh, this thing I'm already doing, I didn't realize that was a form of self-care, and it just adds some depth and meaning to what we're already doing or what we're trying to get ourselves to do. So having said that, Pat, what is something that you do as a current self-care practice?
I think the main self-care practice, because I really do a lot of self-care, it developed over these months, but meditation for me, I think, is number one. And I really should mention that journaling is number two.
So how did you find out about meditation initially? What drew you to it?
Well, years ago, I did do yoga, and of course, at the end, they do a meditation. And so I felt across the years, I've taken classes or courses that include that. And so I felt that that was really something that I could do, and that would be a huge benefit for me.
And there are so many different kinds of meditation. What does yours look like?
I usually like guided meditations, and the silent meditations are helpful as well, but also meditations with deep breathing. I have come across that as the constant in all of the meditations. So I can do it during the day at any given moment. with
Right.
less than 5 minutes, and it just can turn you around from a situation.
I totally agree. And it's so powerful that we have this tool that is always readily available. And I think it's important to mention that the number one, well, yeah, one of the top three reasons women give for not taking care of themselves is that they don't have enough time. But really, there is more than enough time for breathing. You can breathe
Right.
when you're doing all sorts of other stuff. And like you said, it can completely shift your mindset. It can shift your emotional state. It can shift everything and bring you back into a place that is welcoming and more stable than our emotions and our thoughts.
Right. And people think, well, meditation, you have to sit there for an hour or more, 30 minutes. And with the breathing, it can, like I said, it can just be at a quick relief for
Exactly.
stress.
You can meditate for 1 minute and it can turn things around.
Right. That's why it's so phenomenal.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite place you go to for your guided meditations?
I'd like to, but not really. Like I said, it's if it's on the fly, it just can be anywhere, here at my desk or at the kitchen
Mm-hmm.
or in the bedroom area.
Yeah, perfect. Just making it work for your current lifestyle.
Right.
Do you purchase guided meditations, or do you have an app, or how does that work for you?
I have done classes and that I can refer back to,
Okay, yeah.
and I have a lot of the MP3s on my phone or on my computer. And again, like I purchased so many classes that they're on my computer and I can go back to them. And of course, there's YouTube.
Yes, right. There's a multitude of resources. There's just no excuse not to meditate, actually.
Right. Right.
The reason I had a spotty meditation practice, I would do it for a while and then I would stop and I would come up with excuses like my kids are little and they need me. And then I was taking a course and one of my mentors said, if you're too busy to meditate, then you're too busy. You need to change something.
Right.
And I decided, okay, I'm going to really devote myself to making sure I do some sort of meditation on a daily basis. Sometimes it is for a lengthy period of time. Sometimes it's for a few minutes. And as long as there is some sort of focus on breathing and connecting with myself, I love to think I'm taking a break from being Christina. I'm just going to be energy for a little while. And that is really soothing. And it shifts the mindset. It shifts how I am inhabiting my body. And it just is so powerful. I highly recommend if you're not meditating, it's so simple to start. You don't need any tools. You have YouTube, like Pat said, you have the space in your current surroundings, and it's as simple as following your breath. Of course, you can get very complicated with meditation too, but it is transformative and there's really no excuse not to do it. So if you're too busy to meditate, you are too busy and something needs to change, because prioritizing even just your breath and your connection to the inner parts of you is very transformative.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yes. And tell us a little bit about the journaling. How did that start for you?
Again, I took a class. I don't know if I can mention people specifics,
Of course.
but
Yes, please.
well, with the original meditating, you can take a lot of free classes with Deepak Chopra.
Yes.
And so that's an avenue. But I had taken a class with Natalie Ledwell, and she's a transformative speaker, and I took her course. And so I had never done journaling, and I had been put off by it. And so we did an exercise in the class, and it just opened up a whole new world, because I didn't realize that you can write and write and write and ask a question and the answer comes to you. That was just like, I still don't believe that is so magical.
Isn't it? Oh, yeah, I'm covered in goosebumps.
Yeah, it's just so magical. And so if you take the time to do that as well, in my coaching practice, I have learned that. And so it's just amazing how you can get some guidance, inner guidance, that you don't even know is there.
Yeah,
So
it
that's
is
kind of how it developed. Yeah.
I had this one experience where I was at a retreat, and I was walking down a path, and a hummingbird came and sat in a bush in front of me, and it completely stopped moving. And I had never seen a hummingbird in stillness before. And I thought, this is a sign, and I do not know what it is. How am I going to find out?
Yeah.
Some people can hear the messages from animals, and I am not one of those people. And I was so disappointed that I didn't know what the sign was. But when I sat down to journal later in the day, I asked, what was the meaning of that hummingbird? And it just poured out of my pen. And I was so surprised, like you said, that the answer was there. I just needed a different way of accessing it.
Right. So I have continued to do that. I have books and notebooks, and I had a book for a year of journaling, and so it's just a very therapeutic, very, very therapeutic.
Well, I love what you said, Pat, that you had resistance to it, but someone gave you some guidance and gave you the opportunity to try it, and it completely shifted for you. And I think that is so valuable when it comes to self-care. We may have blocks and resistance about different methods and practices, and then all of a sudden they show up in our life and it completely changes. I love that you said that, and that's so important to keep in mind. And that's why I talk about your current self-care practice, because it can totally change. I used to write absolutely every day. I called it sitting for guidance. And then I took a break from all the practices I was doing, and that one didn't feel like it was necessary to add back in, but something else came in that is filling me up. So I feel like we can be fluid with our self-care. We don't have to be completely rigid and be open to new experiences. But if something is working for you, then absolutely keep doing it.
Right, right. So yes, and I do have a lot of other things that I've pulled from that,
Yeah.
like you say. I mean, I've done chair yoga, mirror work, Ayurvedic practices. There's a journal specifically that my teachings brought me to, where it has morning thoughts and feelings and intuitions, and then goals for the day, and then a gratitude list. It focuses on food, and 15 self-care steps that you can do on a daily basis, one or all of them.
Oh, beautiful.
So I draw from everything.
Yes.
Because I felt I was in survival mode.
Right, I'm sure. And what I love about what you're saying too, Pat, is that there is, when you are seeking something for yourself, it is so valuable to go out and take courses or learn from other people. We're not meant to figure it all out on our own. And yes, that inner wisdom is certainly there, but often we need some guidance on how to actually get there. And so I appreciate that you're talking about going out into the world and learning from people who are teaching what is valuable.
Exactly.
And that's another mistake I think people make with self-care, is that we tend to think, because that word self is in there, that we have to do it all by ourselves and all our practices should be by ourselves. And that's just not the case. The best self-care happens when there's human connection, and whether it's learning from someone else or being in community and having that experience, all of that can be self-care.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're not here alone.
Kudos to you for reaching out and educating yourself.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to pause for a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the story of courage, so be sure to stick around. Welcome back. We are getting into the juiciest part of the interview. I love to get guests to share stories of courage, and I do that for a couple of reasons. One is, being a guest on the show, I always have people say, well, I really had to think about that. It was quite interesting. And so it's valuable to even just think about your stories of courage. And secondly, I love to hear stories of courage, because courage is a collective energy. And I feel like the more we are exposed to it through story, the more we can embody it ourselves and acknowledge that we are all, in fact, courageous. We have the opportunity to always become more courageous. It's just like exercising your body. It's a muscle, and the more acknowledgement you give yourself that you are courageous, the more courageous you become, and then you can take on broader and more exciting adventures in your life. So having said that, Pat, what is a story of courage that you would like to share with us today?
Well, I think I'd like to share that about a year and a half ago, I finally decided that I needed to take care of myself.
Yes.
And I think it was through fear. I feared that I was not going to be able to take care of my husband if I didn't start taking a little bit care of myself. And through the hospice program that my husband is in, there you're introduced as also being important to that they focus on us as caregivers. But if it doesn't come from within, I don't think that any of these wonderful people would really have been able to have helped me, because I am so isolated at times. And it was through fear. And so I had to conquer that. And I started feeling better immediately.
What was the first thing that you did? Do you remember?
I do remember one day I just told myself physically I needed the energy to do this. So I have a background of being a dieter, quote, a dieter, and I've done all the diets. So I just told myself I was going to cut the sugar out, cut the white flour out, cut the coffee out, and I cut the dairy out, except eggs. I still eat eggs. And I have to tell you, it wasn't a problem. It wasn't hard. I was just tired of the symptoms. And I did it. And I'm so grateful that I did, that I took that one step. And then about a month later, I found my schooling and I enrolled.
Wow.
So that's how it happened. So like I said, it just came about through fear.
Yes. Well, yeah. And sometimes I think we're even just afraid of fear itself. And there's always fear when it comes to courage. It's not that all of a sudden we have no fear. That's actually the definition of courage, is that there's something on the other side of the fear that is a value that is drawing us towards it. And what helps is connecting your mind and your heart. So if there's something on the other side that you value, which for you was the possibility of not even being able to care for your husband. So it sounds like underneath that, there's contribution that is a value to you, and love and support for your husband. And we need to make a decision to move through that fear. And so that's what you did. And if we don't have something on the other side, then we are not going to move through it. We'll stay stuck. But having some deciding what is on the other side of the fear. Maybe it's adventure, maybe it's compassion, maybe it's beauty. Like there are all these ideals that can draw us towards it. And then we don't have to push so hard through the fear. Like you said, it was an easy transition for you once you made the decision, because it's drawing us towards that value. And those values are always so much more important to us than staying stuck.
Right. I needed something positive in my life, and I just felt that the schooling and the being able to help someone down the road. I'm also writing a book on this journey, so it's all helped me get through my goal.
Well, those are big deal things. Like, did you ever imagine that you would go to nutrition school and write books?
Never in my wildest dream. So when it came to me, it was at the right time because it was so health oriented. And again, I really didn't know it would take me to helping others, but it came so natural. And the things I see that are so preventable with health and illness, if we just take the time to know, and people don't know.
Or sometimes we do know and we just don't want to make the change because it's hard.
That's true. We need a little guidance.
Yeah, that's what we were saying before. If you can go get some help from someone else, it makes it so much easier than trying to slog through it on your own, right?
Right, because knowing something isn't the motivation sometimes, the intellect part of it.
Right. Yes. You don't actually know until you're doing.
Right.
Yeah. So, Pat, I think it's really interesting that you're coming from this place of being a caregiver, because when I first started talking about self-care and focusing on that as a model, I would search self-care on the internet, and this was not long ago, but there was almost nothing out there in terms of, well, all it said was self-care for caregivers. So that awareness has been around longer than the media-driven version of self-care that's more prevalent now. It's more forefront in the forefront of people's minds. But why do you think that caregivers struggle with self-care?
Well, I think that sometimes we lack that anyway. A lot of people lack the self-love, but they are giving people and do want to give and care for a loved one. And it can be so damaging to the caregiver because they put themselves second or even last.
Yes.
In a relationship with or without an illness. And women tend to do that a lot.
I agree.
And so I think it makes it harder on the caregiver. When I first started caregiving, I asked people what would be the most important thing they wanted to share, like for my book and stuff. And they said to not feel bad about taking some time for yourself. It's just something, like I said, mostly women tend to put themselves on the back burner.
Yes.
Their mothers, their wives, their employees, and it's just not always there for women.
Yeah, I do feel like this movement of self-care is really linked to feminine energy and learning to prioritize ourselves and knowing that we are important. We're critical, and our well-being is the most important thing, because as you said, if we are drained and exhausted and empty, there's no way we're giving good care.
Right. It's back to that example of being on an airplane. Get the mask first and then take care of your children or someone that needs help. Right. And you're not aware of it. It just, again, making the time or having someone guide you through that. Because like I said, the help around me is there to help the other person that you're caring for. There's not a whole lot they can do for you unless you dig down deep and try and get that out for yourself. Learn how to do that.
Yeah, that's so important to recognize. So I have one more question for you around this topic, Pat. If someone was going into the situation of, or let's say someone they're feeling bogged down, they're a caregiver, they are doing so much for their loved one and they're not really taking care of themselves, what would you say is the most important thing in your mind that you need to shift to be able to take the steps that you've taken?
It's kind of a little bit of a different aspect. It's to be able to ask for help.
Yes.
Because I know that was really, really hard for me, because I knew I was going to do what I had to do, but there were times that I really, really needed help. It's very humbling. And so to be able to reach out and to strangers, and if you do set that intention, the people appear and they're so giving and they're so more than I ever thought. So if I hadn't asked, I would have never gotten the help that I needed.
That is
in many ways.
Powerful advice. Thank you for sharing that. And I totally agree that it's one of our weaknesses, that we consider it a weakness to ask for help. It actually takes so much strength and courage. And so if your goal is to become a courageous person or to become more courageous, that is a great first step to get over yourself and say, I am not superwoman. I'm not this independent island who can function by myself. I actually need to connect with others. And yes, people love to help. We are designed to contribute and help to each other. And so often we just shut that out. But if you set an intention and you're open to receiving the help once it comes, like you said, people will be delighted with the result, right?
Right. And I guess that comes again with fear. I think you either have fear or love, and the fear of being rejected and saying no to was there. And again, it was another challenge for me that I had to overcome.
Yes, rejection has been a big nemesis of mine for sure. And what has helped me go through it is when I do get rejected, I feel whatever emotion comes up, I feel it rather than suppressing it. And I say, okay, this is rejection. I've lived through this before. It's going to pass. There are plenty of other people to ask. And this is just how rejection feels. It's purely uncomfortable. And the discomfort will move through as long as I acknowledge those emotions. So yeah, that rejection, being able to identify it and say, this is why I have this fear. And yes, we are going to get rejected. That's definitely part of life. And it hurts. And then we can move on.
Right. But again, I had such clear goals that I needed to accomplish that I just was compelled to put myself out there.
Yeah, having that something on the other side of the fear helps us move towards whatever it is that's on the other side. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story, Pat. I know that's going to help a lot of people, and this doesn't feel like it's something that's talked about all that much. There are so many people in the caregiver position, and yes, there are resources for the person being cared for, but not necessarily for the caregiver. So I appreciate you sharing what it's like on the inside and how you were able to overcome that. I'm sure people are going to be curious and want to connect with you about how you did it and the work that you're moving into. So how can they get in touch with you online?
Well, I have my website, and it's called abcsofhealthwellness.com.
Perfect. And the link for that will be in the show notes, so you can check it out there. And you've got something else there?
Yes, and if you go to the website, you can ask for a free health history consultation, and I'd be more than happy to conduct that with you and help you in any way I can.
That is such a beautiful offer, Pat. Thank you for gifting that to our listeners. That's very generous. And I encourage you listeners, check in right now. If there is some energetic tension around the offer of having someone help you, that is a hidden yes. If there's nothing, then it's not resonant, and that's fine. And if there is something, if there's something bubbling up and you're thinking, ooh, I could never do that, or oh, that feels uncomfortable, that is a hidden yes. So I encourage you to take action on that. Try something new, ask for help, reach out to someone who has invested time and energy into educating herself, because we're here for you, right, Pat?
Exactly, absolutely.
And we love to help. So I encourage you to take action on that, explore something new. You will be amazed at how alive you feel. And that's one of the benefits of moving through fear, is way more energy, way more aliveness and vitality. Pat, I appreciate you sharing your self-care practices and your story of courage. Thank you so much for helping us understand what it's like on the inside of caregiving.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure and my honor, and I look forward to all your podcasts.
Oh, well, thank you. And listeners, wherever you are in the world, I was looking the other day, you are from about 33 different countries. So that is pretty exciting. When I started this podcast, I thought I just could talk about self-care for at least a year, and I've done that. I didn't imagine that it would go out to so many different people, and I'm very grateful to you for listening, because it is an act of self-care to carve out a half hour in a day and listen to a podcast. And I encourage you to take action. That is the next step. So if something in here resonated for you, maybe you're going to start journaling. Maybe you're going to start noticing when it's time to take a deep breath. Maybe you're going to reach out and do something scary and connect with Pat and do this health history and see if what you're doing is serving you or if there are some changes you can make that will make you feel even better. I encourage you to take action because that is where the real self-care is. It's in the taking of the action. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.